Hi there and welcome to my tutorial on how to make your own Christmas decoration. What I'm doing is these little cute snowmen. So I made a bunch of these in my stall, and as with lots of things at the moment, hardly any of them are sold, but I thought I'll probably put them on my tree or make them into garlands of some kind. But I've done a green one, a blue one and a red one in proper Christmassy colours. Now these are all knitted in 230s industrial yarn, stranded twice, so 2 strands in the yarn. Now I appreciate not everyone will have this yarn, but to get the superior finish on these snowmen, I would recommend that's what you would use. However, because there's quite a lot of newbies out there at the moment and most people will have 4-ply, I've done a 4-ply variant. I've not quite finished this guy off. I've not sewn the buttons on, but I've done everything else. So I've altered the pattern for using 4-ply. So there's some stitch and row variances, and the hat on these ones is actually got much broader stripes than in the 4-ply because of the changes in tension. But everything else is knitted very similarly. So I'm just going to go through how I did all this. It's all knitted in 3 pieces, for the body, the hat and the scarf, and it's very simple to do, and it's a perfect little project if you've not had your machine long, or you're just still getting acquainted with the machine and you've got a ribber and you want to really show yourself how to do something basic on that. So okay, just put these guys aside. Okay, so to knit the body, I'm going to show you the 4-ply one in the video, but the documents that I'll put on the group and by the video, I will actually have all the instructions on how to do both 4-ply and 230, depending which one you want to do. But for the 4-ply one, we're going to cast on 46 stitches. That's 23 either side of 0. So I'm just going to get those stitches. 23 either side, and I'm going to do the weaving cast on. Now because of my previous video and everyone found that quite useful, I'll just do this a bit more slowly. So as you can see, I've got all the needles, but I've actually brought half of them forward using the 1-1 selection tool. I usually do it from the far right hand needle, but it doesn't really matter much, some people prefer it the other way. And I'm going to use the actual yarn that I'm going to be using. I'm not going to cast on with waste or anything. So we put our weaving brushes into work on both sides. And for this sample we're actually going to be knitting on a tension of 4. So it's 2 tighter than like the main tension of 6 that we probably would normally knit for a lot of pattern knitting. The reason for that is because you need a nice tight knit for when you stuff it, because this is going to be stuffed really tightly and you really don't want the stuffing to show through. Okay, so I've brought my yarn through the feeder. I've made sure that it's free of all the brushes, and I've draped it over the top of all my needles, and I'm just holding it firmly there with my left hand, and I'm just going over from right to left, and then you can see it's just knitted properly. Now I'm going to knit, just going to set my row counter, so I'll just set that I've knitted 1 row, because we're going to knit a certain amount of rows of this. Just going to go across again about 4 times, and now I'm going to hang my weights, and I can take my weaving brushes off now that I've done those 4 rows. Okay, just be very careful when you do this first row with the weights, because sometimes you can damage the weights and the carriage if you're not careful. Okay, so I'm going to knit 64 rows at tension 4, so I've knitted 5 already, so I'm just going to go through all these rows quite quickly. So you should have ended with the carriage at the right. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to break the yarn, just leaving a nice long tail. Now using my double-eyed bodkin, which should be by my machine, I'm going to thread the end going to do now is I'm just going to remove the weights. It's actually easy to do without the weights. You'll see why in a minute. And we're just going to go through each of the stitches from the right. So you just go from front to back through that stitch, through the next stitch, and the next stitch, and so on. Now I'm quite good at this, and I've done it quite a few times, but to make it a little bit easier on yourself, you can do the last 2 rows at a looser tension and it won't affect the general piece. So maybe do it 3 looser than you were knitting, so knit it at 6 or 7, and that will just make these stitches a little bit larger and make them a bit easier to go through. Like I said, it doesn't bother me too much. It's all about how confident you are. And then after I've done each set, I just bring the needles all the way forward and backwards out of work, and that just releases the stitches just to make it a bit easier to do the rest. Now the reason we're doing this is that once we've taken all these stitches off on the same length, we can actually gather the top by just pulling on the end of the yarn. Now, I said in my, some of my comments after the video I just did that the weaving cast on has a great side effect in enabling you to gather as well, and we're going to use this when making these snowmen up, because we can actually gather on both ends without really doing any complicated sewing when we're doing it. And in hand knitting really it's not possible to do this, so it's great that we have this cast on the machine to do it very easily. Nearly there. The last one. Okay, so, and then we just literally pull that all the way through, and you can see as I pull that, that gathers that. Now I'm not going to show you all this right now because I don't really have time in the video, but what I would now do is I would thread my end into the bodkin, or a tapestry needle if you prefer, and we just literally, this is where the end of the yarn is coming out, and then we just go to the opposite end and pull it nice and tight. And then what I would normally do is you will always get a bit of a hole here, so I would just stitch over that hole with several over stitches just to seal that hole up, because this is actually going to be the visible hole. And then how I sew it up is I overstitch all the way down the seam, and then that will leave you with a kind of a tubular piece which has one open side here, and then I will stuff all that all the way down until the stuffing is only visible at this open edge, and then you pull the other end and over sew just over this end to seal that edge up, and then we take the working yarn down through the inside, so through the stuffing, and then out a third down, and then basically just wrap the yarn around the neck points, and make it really tight just so you've got that snowman shape, and and then embed the end of the yarn inside the snowman and cut it. Okay, well that's the body. It's all very simple to do. So I'll just put that to one side. So now I'm going to knit the scarf. So the scarf is knitted on 6 stitches, whether you're using industrial yarn or 4-ply. So I've brought my 6 stitches, so 6 to the left of 0 and, sorry, I apologise, 3 to the left and 3 to the right of 0. Now it's important to note that if you're doing this on a punch card knitting machine, you must make sure that your end needle selection is not functional. There's a setting on the carriage where you can actually turn 2 screws on the underside. There is good instructions in the manual how to do this, because if you don't cancel end needle selection, when we do our tuck pattern in a minute for this, it will keep bringing these end 2 needles forward, which is a bit of the problem when you've only got a 6-stitch pattern. Okay, so weaving cast on again. I'm actually going to cast on and waste for this because the reason is that the only way to actually get a pattern started really is to have knitted a few rows already. It's not really feasible to start patterning from the first row after cast on. So I do it by casting on with a few rows of waste, then I do a couple of normal rows, which I'll show you how to do in a second, and then after I've done the whole thing, I latch off. Okay, so weaving cast on again. We're actually knitting at a tension of 6, which is the main tension for the 4-ply. You don't need a tight knit for this one. So just hanging my weights. Now I've tucked the carriage to the far left of a turn mark. I'm going to turn my machine on. Now I've got a 950i, so I'm just going to set it up to knit pattern 256. Make sure it's on the first row of the pattern. Now if you've got a punch card, just put the 1-1 punch card in, which is usually punch card 1 on the Brother punch card machines. I'm not sure what it is on the Knitmaster, but it literally has every other stitch and every other alternate stitch punched on each row. Okay, just take my weaving brushes off. Now we're going to bring it across, still with waste yarn, and the needles should have come out selected, and they have. Now what I do is I cut the yarn, get my contrast yarn that I'm using, which will be red for this snowman. And then what I'm going to do, I'm not going to press in the tuck button, so even though it's selecting the needles, it is actually only knitting normally at the moment. And then I'm going to do 2 rows, so that's the first row and the second row. The reason for this is the latch off will be much easier if it's on normal plain knitted rows. Now I'm just going to press both the tuck buttons in, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure this as I go. So basically I just knit until it reaches 18 centimetres, which is, this is quite handy, which is a full one of these 1-1 selection tools plus an extra 3 centimetres on top of that. So important to keep a nice even tension when you do this and not get carried away, because the scarf can easily become a bit malformed if you don't. So that is now 15 plus almost 3, probably another 4 rows. so now we've got to the end. I just cancel the pattern, so just go to NL or the normal knitting setting. Now we're going to cast off. Now break the yarn. We're just going to cast off behind the gate pegs. So that's where we just transfer onto the transfer tool and then just go across behind the gate peg, put it onto the next needle and then knit with the yarn across and across. And then you just knit the last stitch kind of twice. And then just pull the thread through and that's the scarf knitted. Okay, and it's got that lovely textured tuck pattern. It just gives it a bit more texture and it does roll a little bit at the edges, but not nearly as much as it would if you did a stocking stitch scarf. Okay, so that's that bit done. Now we're going to knit the hat, which involves us knitting with the ribber. Now, say in the documentation that if you don't have a ribber, you can still knit this. You could simply just do all the stocking stitch, and for the hem, just basically do twice the amount of stitches for the hem, and on the tight tension, and then it will just roll back when you do when you sew it up, which will still look quite good, but you don't need a ribber to do this. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is set up my machine for the hat. So we need 35 stitches, which is 17 on the left and 18 on the right. And we're going to set it up for 1 rib. So 17 and 18 on the right. Bring all those needles back, and then just bring all up on the ribber. Needles, and then going on to be on 0, 0. And slide lever 2. I'm going to get the contrast yarn again, which will be red. And I've been doing these hats in the contrast colour and white for the stripes, but you can do them however you want. So this is my first colour. So I'm just going to go across. Now I'm going to hang my cast on comb. Wire across. Now I'm just going to use the little weights for this because it's so tiny. In fact, you could almost get away with just a comb. Now I'm going to do a broken toe cast on. And what that is once we've hung the comb and the weights, we just literally take the river carriage across and drop all the stitches on the riverbed. It may look scary, but it does work. And now we're just going to bring the whole carriage all the way across. Now it should be knitting on both carriages. And just make sure that all these stitches are knit through, because sometimes they don't always. Now what we're going to do is we're going to do a 2-row selvage. So we're going to slip left on the knit bed and slip right on the river bed. Okay, so we're going to, so we've knitted to the left on the ribber, and then we knitted to the right on the main knitting bed. Now we cancel that, so a normal knitting, slide levers on 1. Now I go to the tension for my rib, which is 2, 2, and I'm going to knit 6 rows. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And after that, I'm just going to bring my needles that are required on the main bed, and I'm going to transfer all the ribber needles to the corresponding main bed needles. Now you can use a transfer carriage to do this. I've never got on with them myself, but some people really do love them, and if it works for you, that's great. But I find can transfer it so much quicker, and to be honest, this is so tiny, by the time you've got the carriage on and everything, you could have done this. Although I will be showing you in a minute a lace carriage way of transferring stitches to adjacent needles. Okay, so drop the main bed, take the rubber sinker plate off, put our main bed sinker plate on, and we're going to go up to main tension, which is 6. Okay, and then we're going to knit 2 rows of the main colour at tension 6, so that's 1, 2. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that out, and I'm just going to rest it on this arm of the ribber. You can do it another way if you prefer, but basically this is my cheap's way of changing colour without a colour changer, because I do have the single bed and double bed colour changes, but I just don't find it worth it for something so small. And then just drop that end, and bring it in. There we go. So we changed colour to the red again, and we've knitted 2 rows. And then we changed colour again and knit another 2 rows. We're knitting 12 rows in total, the whole hat. This is after the rib, of course, so we're knitting another 2 rows of the white. That's 2, 4, 6, 8. So now we're back to red, and we're actually going to stay on red now. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cut that white. And now we're going to knit 2 rows of this red. Now we need to transfer all the stitches to adjacent needles. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to again set my machine for pattern 256, which is my 1-1 pattern, set it on the first row, and you can do this on a punch card. Just put your punch card in at row 1 and then literally bring your lace carriage across. It should set every alternate needle. Sometimes it misses one at the end, I don't know why, but right, and then we just go across with the lace carriage, put light pressure down, but not too much. As you go across, it should transfer all those needles nicely. Now you just need to remember to take all those alternate needles out of work. Then on the next row, I'm just going to take the tension down to 4 and knit the final 2 rows. Let's turn the machine off now. And now, similar to the body, I'm just going to cut the yarn, give a nice long tail, and take these stitches off the machine. Now it's really important to take the cast on comb off, because it really will weigh the knitting down as you're taking those last few stitches off. So so now you can take this off on waste yarn. Just makes it a little bit easier, but it is quite wasteful. Sorry, pun. And if you can do it on the machine, it just takes a minute or two, and save that yarn, then all the better. I mean, there's some things you can't, you know, avoid using waste yarn, but this is not one of them. Right, so you've got your end of yarn. This is the broken toe cast on, and you've got this set of loops here. So what you need to do is you've got your working yarn on this side, but on the opposite end to the working yarn, you've got this little loop here on the very end. You need to get the final loop and then just put your bodkin through and pull it, and then basically just make sure you get the end that's pulling from the right side, and then pull that end all the way through, and you see how that gives a really neat edge. And again, this opposite end, if you pull that, you can see how that's gathered that nicely and made a nice top to your hat. Okay. Now what I do is, when I'm making these up, I use some double face satin ribbon, which is this stuff here. I cut a length suitable, which is entirely up to you how long you want your loop to be. Just need to go over your tree branch though. But I cut that length and I tie a knot in the end of it. So tie the two ends together with a knot, and I basically sew the hat up from the bottom upwards in a corresponding colour, so the colours don't show through the right side. And when I get to the top, I place that ribbon through here, and I pull that tight around the ribbon. So the ribbon's then embedded inside here, and then what I then do is I go through the loop of the ribbon and around under the hat several times just to secure that, so it won't come out when you've hung it on the tree. And then now we've got all our pieces to knit the snowman. To make it up. So once we've stuffed that, you just place the scarf around the neck and sew it in a position that you're happy with, and embroider the face with black 4-ply using back stitch and just over stitch for the eyes, and then just sew on the buttons. Sorry about that. Now one final thing I'm just going to show you quickly is how to cast off this scarf. So you've got your cast on edge of yarn here, and you want to be on the opposite ends to that. So you want the loop on the far edge on the right. You just catch that with your latch tool, put it on your latch tool, and then the next loop over, you using a loop through loop technique, you just grab that loop and pull it through, and pull it all the way back on the latch tool, and then hook onto the next loop, pull it through, back onto the latch tool, and the same until you've done all the loops and pulled them through, and then you finally pull the end of yarn through the final loop, and that's your cast off. And then you can either cut off the waste yarn, or you can actually pull each loop individually. Now I will get to double jacquard. I'm not sure if it'll be before Christmas, but I am going to do a jacquard tutorial. If you need an in-depth video on sewing this snowman up, please comment on the section below, and I will do one. I don't mind, but if you're happy with the instructions in the document and the video that I've given so far, that's great. That's great as well. I've tried to give as much information as I can, but obviously I don't want to make the video too long so people get a bit bored, you know, of all the more me talking constantly. But and there, that's your scarf all done. Okay, I hope this tutorial was useful and you found it helpful, and that maybe it will encourage you to make some Christmas snowmen. Thanks very much.